Andrew Marr joins me, I'm pleased to say, presents Tonight with Andrew Marr from 6 o'clock on LBC, but you know that. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, Sheila.
I've been thinking about you a lot this weekend.
Oh, thank you.
Only for political reasons, I hasten to add, in case Jackie's listening. Only for political reasons, because I remember on election night when we were presenting the programme together in those long hours, when it was clearly emerging quite quickly that this was going to be a stonking win for the Labour Party. I remember you talking about Morgan McSweeney and the important role that he had and was going to continue to have at the centre of Downing Street operations, and he's the man to watch in this story in a way, isn't he?
He absolutely is. He is now connected to every aspect of Starmer's government. He's in an incredibly powerful position. It's very difficult to talk about individuals who are not well known to listeners or viewers, but I think he is the nearest thing Labour has had to a political electoral genius for a very, very long time. He's an incredibly eloquent, very, very focused, extremely tough guy. Whether he's any good at running a government is another question entirely, and that will become clear over time. But you were saying right at the beginning, Sheila, is this just a Westminster story? Does it matter to people listening? And I think it matters because I think that this will change, as it were, the tilt, the approach, the direction, the flavour of the government, and that we will all notice that. And if I can cut to the chase, I think that Morgan McSweeney is somebody who is particularly focused on the interests of what they now call working people. I think we used to call them the working classes. We're not allowed to use that phrase anymore. Don't know why. Working people, anyway. In other words, he's very, very focused on people who are struggling to pay the bills, who are suspicious of government, who are focused really on things like the health service, crime, immigration. He's not really interested in what he would regard as the fripperies of politics. And so what I hope is that out of this we get a more focused, more directed, more comprehensible government. We understand who they're really thinking about first, and that's where all governing starts from.
And on Sue Gray, one of the criticism might even be too big a word for what I heard over the weekend, but some of the commentary on her performance as his sort of chief of staff was that she didn't have the political chops to do it in a way that he does. So she wasn't, because you do have to operate and swerve politically as well as factually, don't you? Just explain the nuance between those two things.
I think that's absolutely right, Sheila. And of course, that's one of the things said about Keir Starmer himself, is that he is naturally, as it were, a lawyer and a technocrat. He thinks there is a logical, clear answer to most questions, and if you go to the experts and you get the answer, that's what you do. But of course, politics is much more complicated than that. Lots and lots of interests nudging and fighting with each other, lots of explaining and storytelling to do as well. And in a sense, Sue Gray, say the critics, was a little bit too much like the Prime Minister himself. Now, it's absolutely clear that she was on the end of some really unpleasant, really nasty personal briefings by her enemies, and she wasn't able to explain herself. She's not allowed to talk in public. She never briefed herself, so far as I'm aware. And she made lots of enemies because she was the doorkeeper. She was the person who protected Keir Starmer. And so lots of, very often men who were on the wrong side of her door when it slammed shut were very, very angry with her. But having said all of that, you do need a chief of staff who really understands British politics and is keeping the government on course. There's been a sense of sort of wallow and adrift, I think, recently, and I hope that's about to end.
And whatever she brought to the campaign, only Labour can really answer that. But, is it your sense that she's a civil servant to her bones, and that might have been the problem?
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. And in a way, that was why Keir Starmer wooed her and brought her on board at the beginning. The idea was going to be that there were two centres of power. There was Morgan McSweeney, who was there to win elections, this election, and by the way, the next general election as well. And Sue Gray, very, very marinated in the civil service culture, was going to do the governing bit. And I think that was always a false distinction. Because if you don't know who you're governing for, if you don't have a political sense of direction and, as you describe it, the political chops, then you're going to lose the election anyway. And so I think to have two different centres of power inside a government is always dangerous, always causes confusion. And that's really been the problem, which, let's see, I think Keir Starmer has ended one way or another this weekend.
Well, let's see what fruits are come from this for him, because you'll know that during the election campaign and for a long time before it, actually, a lot of the callers to programmes like this, one of their complaints about him, even though they were desperate to vote for him and or to vote for someone other than the Tories at that point, was they didn't they were still umming and ahhing about Labour because of him, because of the story, the lack of a story that they felt they were being told. If that has still lingered a bit up to this point in government, what do we need to start hearing and seeing so that people will think, right, that's what they're about?
Well, to govern, as they say, is to choose. So we need to know what are the big choices being made, because you can't have everything. Now, if there is a choice between encouraging big business and very wealthy individuals to stay here, on the one hand, and raising the tax money to improve the NHS, which way do they jump and why? If there is a choice between keeping wages down in the care sector and being more restrictive about immigration, which way do they jump and why? And so on and so on. Always there are these choices, and I think they have to explain to us more what they're choosing and why they're choosing and on whose behalf.
And what about stories that they have, well, initially anyway, little control over? A paper or whoever suddenly says Minister X or Minister Y has spent too much money on this, or has taken a gift X, Y and Z, whatever it happens to be, or tweeted something inappropriate or whatever. Is that Morgan McSweeney's job to tackle that kind of stuff?
Well, it will be now. One of the, I think, mysteries about Sue Gray, and she does seem in many ways a mysterious character. I'm not sure that she exists, I think she might be something out of a children's story.
No, she does exist. Shall I tell you why I know she exists? I went to a friend's house in that interim period between the report being finished into Partygate, but the Met police thing still going on, and we had to wait. She walked past me on my way into a friend's house as she was leaving said friend's house, and I didn't recognise her when she walked past me.
Well,
I could have grabbed 5 minutes with her, but anyway, I didn't.
I have seen her and I have exchanged a few words with her, but she still seems to be a fundamentally mysterious figure. But one of the mysteries around her is that, as you mentioned just now in the Boris Johnson years, she was Ms. Ethics. She was in charge of, as it were, cleaning up the mess, clearing the Augean stables and all of that. And so you would have assumed that when it came to things like taking money from Lord Ali for clothes or whatever it is, she would be absolutely onto that straight away and say, OK, you haven't broken any rules here, Prime Minister, but this is not going to look good. But she appears not to have done that. And I thought there was several weeks, really, when Keir Starmer was left, as it were, to swing alone in the wind in the face of all this criticism. And he really needed people around him to say, no, don't do this. This is what you do now. Let's have another story to deflect attention from people like Shelagh Fogarty. Let's, let's pay the money back or whatever. And he was left too long. And really, that was her job.
He's going to give a statement at about 3:30 in the Commons. Not on this, I don't think, but he's bound to be asked about it, isn't he? Or it's bound to be referred to. The Conservatives at the moment, obviously, still in their search for a leader. Is that doing him favours, do you think? The fact that there isn't really an opposition at the moment?
I think he's quite lucky in that. And I think part of the timing of these changes in Downing Street is because there isn't a single Conservative leader to make hay with this and to attack him in the House of Commons. I mean, there are 4 Conservative leaders in effect at the moment. Tomorrow there will be 3. And so it goes on. But I think for the Conservatives not to have their newly anointed leader in time for this, and then, of course, at the end of the month in time for the budget either, has been a mistake for the Tories.
Do you think the riots in August could have derailed this a bit as well? I mean, they're deemed to have been handled well afterwards, but could that have taken up precious time when an establishment of the order might have been happening?
OK, two puzzles about all of this. One, the Sue Gray plan was that she would have, a plan in place for the first 6 months, a plan that went down to what they were going to do, what they were going to announce, what they're going to bring into the House of Commons week after week after week. Now, what I'm told is that, like the rest of the country, they were simply taken aback by the timing of the election from Rishi Sunak, and that the time that they were going to put these plans together was right now. They expected the election to be coming in November or even December. And so they were caught on the hop a bit about that. But when it comes to, the planning ahead, I think, again, this is something that has been a real mess. We've had 100 days. The 100 days finishes at the end of this week, and it has been a really, really unhappy 100 days for the Labour Party. Both of the stories you've been talking about, but also things like the winter fuel allowance cut. I'm not sure that would have been approved had Morgan McSweeney been Chief of Staff. And then, a downbeat Labour conference compared with the one they could have had, and frankly, to give the Conservatives a shot of adrenaline in the arm when they least expected it.
So a bit of politics coming back into the central operation.
A bit of politics is absolutely important. And of course, we'll learn a lot more in the budget, because I was talking about these really hard choices they have to make. Most of those choices, one way or another, will become clear in Rachel Reeves's first budget on October the 30th. That's a really, really important day.
It's when we get a real sense of them,
A real sense of where they're going, where the sense of direction is, because we haven't had a weird sense of indecision and drift so far.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. Great to talk to you. Andrew Marr presents Tonight with Andrew Marr from 6 on LBC.